Brian had the hardest time retiring because he never thought we would be comfortable enough. He didn't want to lose our lifestyle.
But when you come from nothing and you watched your parents struggle or neighbors and family, you're looking at a number, but that doesn't compute in my mind on, is that enough? Will I have enough if there's a medical issue? Can we go on 3 trips a year? So retirement for me has just been just the whole relaxation. I take my blood pressure now, it's like, oh, it's actually low. Because I don't have to worry about anything. I don't have to worry about finances thanks to you guys. And I don't literally worry about anything. My kids are great, wife's great, everybody's healthy. That's the best thing for me. I can just enjoy life now.
All right. This is the inaugural here. You guys were chosen number 1 amongst many, many notable local celebrities. All right, in Dilettante.
Are they the only ones that returned your phone call?
Yeah, they're the only ones.
People, the stupid ones, they answer the email.
So thank you guys. We got Brian and Hope Bailey here. We call this show Saturday State of Mind. You know, we're here to capture your story, find out a little bit more about what makes you tick, what got you here, what hopes and dreams you have for the future, you know, notable things that happened to you along the way, and just talk about life. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. When you got the call, right, to be here with us today, what went through your heads? Why'd you even agree to do this?
Well, we've always had fun here. We like you guys. Anything we could do to help. You know, we always love your charity events and the social events you guys do. We thought this would be just another fun thing to do.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome.
We're very big in like family people, and I already look at you guys as family. I don't even know how many years have we been here now, and I feel like I can come in here and do anything. And I was like, what? They want to put me on TV? Do they not know who I am? That's a very bad idea.
Yeah. We knew what we were getting into.
We have the censor button around here somewhere.
I think it's probably been about 7 years we've known you.
Yeah.
Yes.
I measure things now like pre and post COVID, and we're definitely pre-COVID.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so that's at least 5+ years. But
How long have you been here?
in this office,
Yeah.
2019.
Okay, so that's, and we were with you a
6
couple of years down in Salem, so
Yeah.
it's got to be at
Yeah,
least
so we got
7.
some history. We haven't scared you off yet.
Not yet.
No.
There's still time. So I want to start this like back at the beginning, kind of go back to your roots. And are you guys from New Hampshire, or where do you hail from?
We're both from New York.
Okay.
I was from upstate, and we both met at college. And this is a true story.
Yeah.
It was my junior year, his senior year. I got off the elevator. It was Madonna days. I had crazy hair, ripped shirt on, and
Material girl.
Yeah.
material girl.
Right.
And I'm living next door to these ROTC, like straight-laced people.
Okay.
And I go bopping in, and I go, hi, my name's Hope, la, 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 la. And I left, and Brian goes, what was that?
You forgot the purple hair.
Yeah. So like couple weeks later, we started talking, and I come back to my suite, and I said, that boy, Brian Bailey, I'm going to marry him.
Oh.
The first time?
We were
Well,
probably about
weeks.
2 weeks in.
No kidding.
And I had a boyfriend that I had been dating for a while. He had a girlfriend, and we became friends throughout the year. And I kept saying, I'm going to marry that boy, Brian Bailey. And my roommates literally had an intervention. They sat me down and like, he's going to Arizona. He's in pilot training. He's going to have nothing to do with you. You got to get this. We don't want to see you get hurt. So fast forward, we get married. We're married 10 years. And I'm like, 10 years of marriage. And my roommates go, give it up. He's not going to marry you. Move on. So we're coming upon 40 years.
Wow.
That's amazing.
But I knew when I saw him, and he goes, that's really creepy.
Yeah.
That is creepy that you knew that. But I did.
She had you in her sights, Brian. She wasn't going to give up.
What was it like to be hunted?
He was hunted by a lot of girls. I'm not, a true story.
Yeah.
There was like a mystery woman sending him presents.
Yeah, you didn't send me anything.
No, I didn't. And like following around, I saw you here. And he had a stalker.
Wow.
Yeah, that was really cool. Not for him, but it was for me.
That's pretty cool.
So you were going to the same school? Just so I
Yes.
can understand. What,
Yeah.
Portland State.
Okay.
Yeah,
In SUNY
the way
Cortland.
our suites were, they're like 4 corners, and there were 3 rooms in each with 2 people in a room.
Yeah.
So there were 2 guys' suites and 2 girls' suites, and she was the one right next to us. So we would bang on the wall and say, "Shut up! We're trying to study,"
Yeah.
because they didn't study.
That's
you
what
were
you were
partying.
saying?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You were studying, Brian?
Yeah. Oh,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, he was on the president's list.
Right.
Oh, wow.
This reminds me, I don't know if you know that movie about Freddie Mercury. What's it called? I don't know if it matters. But in the movie, Freddie Mercury is the only person in the band Queen that misbehaves the entire movie.
Yeah.
They're always practicing and whatnot, like never doing drugs or staying. Yeah. So this is your college take?
Yes.
Well, she would come
You were
over
studying
to
the whole time?
to spend time with me, and she'd be like, well, yada, 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 yada. And I'd go, psst, quiet,
Yeah.
read. So she'd read maybe 2 sentences, yada, 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 psst, quiet. But her grades did come up to B's.
I was gonna say, did they improve
Yeah.
when hanging out?
So
with
that's
Brian?
where we
Good
started, and
influence.
then he went away for a year, and I finished up and got my teaching degree. And
I came back and surprised you, though.
yeah, he did. And then in May, I graduated. 2 days later, all I owned was 4 boxes of stuff. Put them on a plane and went to Arizona. And that's
So what was it about this guy?
Do you know what it was? He was very aloof. He was very standoffish. He had incredibly blue eyes. He had blonde hair, and he was tan. And those are the things. If you've got blue eyes, that's what I automatically.
He was Goose from Top Gun.
No, he was Val Kilmer.
Okay.
Val Kilmer,
that's
yeah.
Iceman.
the
Iceman.
The Iceman.
Yep.
That's right.
Okay. Yeah, Goose is what? The nerdy guy that
Yeah.
was on ER later?
But I did point
Anthony
out.
I
Edwards.
miscast you there.
Hey, don't you disparage Goose? It was
Yeah,
very sad.
Goose didn't
when
make it.
No.
But
Yeah. And then we traveled around. We moved so many times with the military. That was our beginnings.
Survival training and basic training, and then Maine and New Jersey.
We went from
well, was this a fitting comparison here? You were Air Force, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. What was that like? Can you bring us into what it was like joining the Air Force when you did?
Well, during the college, you join. So you were a college student. It's like an officer training thing.
Yeah.
So in the 80s, wasn't a lot of fun because you had to have the short hair, and at that time everybody had the long hair, so
Yeah.
you literally stuck out like a sore thumb.
That worked for Hope.
Yeah,
Anyway.
and of course everyone thinks, oh, yeah, it's the nerdy guys, but who had the best parties?
you did.
We were at the tallest building. We had this big purple lamp, and we would, as soon as that lamp went on, everybody on campus knew party time. So we had Pearl Harbor parties where everybody had to come and, in the motif. So you were the Andrew sisters?
Yeah, we dressed as the Andrew sisters.
And my friend and I were kamikaze pilots, and to get in the door, we had to do a depth charge. So it was a shot of bourbon and a 24-ounce beer. That was the entry shot.
Yeah.
And then it just went downhill from there.
Yeah,
These are fun parties.
Yeah.
they were.
So there you go, your next party. Pearl Harbor
It's not a
party.
bad idea. Can you take me back a little bit further when you say you grew up in New York? You mean state, right? Not New York
Right.
City?
Well, I grew up on Long Island, close to the city.
Okay.
Dad was a cop, mom was a nurse, total middle class. Our town was kind of divided by a railroad track, so if you were on the north side, you were incredibly wealthy, and if you were on the south side, middle class to lower.
Yeah.
So I was on the south side. So I was the first kid in my family to go to college, kind of worked my summers like 12-hour shifts every day just to build enough to get me through the year. And I remember that, if you have like an epiphany moment in your life, I was always a good student, but I was walking through our parking lot in high school, and I'm passing Mercedes, BMWs, Audis, Volvos, and these were the kids' cars. These weren't the teachers' cars.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, my school was the first one to have a mainframe computer, Olympic-sized pool. Our driver's ed cars were Thunderbirds, and then I get to my car, 1970 Plymouth station wagon with the whole side crushed in from my mother. Thank you very much.
Okay.
And I remember walking there. I said, you know what? I am going to own one of those cars one of these days.
Yeah.
And that was kind of, when you have that switch goes on, and then that's when I really, as a student, kicked in.
Okay.
You know.
Are there childhood memories that really stand out when you think about your family or just growing up in New York on the south side of the tracks there?
I just had the typical middle class. I did all the sports, the football, the baseball, everything else. My dad was pretty strict. I got the belt quite a few times. By third grade, my mother refused to go to any of my teachers' conferences. She just flat out refused because I was always in trouble. And they actually tested me for a learning disability, but then they tested me and they found I had 139 IQ.
Wow.
So that was the problem. We didn't have special classes like enrichment, or so. Teacher would hand out the assignment. I'd be like, okay, I'm done. Now what can I do? And
Okay.
it was usually getting in trouble. Kindergarten, my mother loves to tell this story. Teacher's like, I don't want to hear a peep out of the class. Well, who goes peep?
Right.
Isn't 139 genius level?
Pretty much.
Holy smokes. How did you get this total complete package of a man?
I don't know, because mine's probably about 2.
So we were talking about growing up.
Right.
And we kind of hit your typical middle class upbringing.
Mm-hmm.
Hope, what would you add to the mix here? What was life like
I
for Little
grew
Hope?
up in upstate New York, and I was very sheltered. We never locked our doors. When my mom was pregnant for my fourth sister, my dad left us. He walked out with a babysitter. And so my mom had 4 girls. We ended up going on welfare for a while. She meets this amazing man who's 20. Well, at the time, he was probably 20. He marries my mom at 23 with 4 girls.
Wow.
He walked every single one of us down the aisle. The man is a saint. And we were court ordered to go see my dad, but once we were old enough not to go there anymore, I didn't go anyway. And my own children never met my father. And we never even told them until my oldest figured out that my parents were celebrating their 25th wedding anniversary. And the numbers didn't go together very well.
How does that add up?
So my stepdad is only 10 years older than me.
Okay.
Yes. So it was one of these things where I would go to a doctor's office and they always had these pretty magazines, and I was always look through them and I would see the pretty blue water. And I was like, I'm going to go there someday. I'm going to do this. And I always looked at the National Geographic, Elle, whatever magazines. I'm like, oh my gosh, look at how beautiful that girl's dress is. How this. My mother looked at me one day and says, girl, you have high hopes. You better marry somebody who's got money. Well, there we go.
There you go, honey.
But I didn't. But honestly, I didn't realize what he was good at. And I literally appreciate everything I have
Yeah,
now.
you got to tell the whole pilot story. With
Well,
your mother.
I will. But the first time we ever flew to the Caribbean, I started crying.
Yeah.
And when I stood
dreams,
at
right?
the Acropolis in Athens, and I was a history major, I started crying. Brian's like, what? He goes, I'm like, I never thought I would witness any of these things. And my life has been so fulfilled. And I actually got a tattoo, Love My Life, because I wake up every day so thankful of all the things that I've been able to see and experience. And one day I said to my mother, I'm like, Mom, how did I do? She goes, you did great. She used to call me her traveling daughter.
Oh.
But the funny part is, I didn't really know what he was doing because I was always such a happy-go-lucky, living for the moment. Every day is a Saturday for me. Every day is
That's
so.
pretty much
What
the
is
way
the
you
fun?
grew up.
What are we doing today that's fun? And so we were in Arizona, and he had just graduated pilot training, and we were moving to California. I had my teaching degree, and I literally said to him, I go, so what are you going to do with your life? I said, I am a teacher. I know that I'm going to teach. What are you going to do? He goes, well, my plan is I'm going to, now we're engaged. We're about ready to get married, and I'm asking
This is a
him,
good time in the
Yeah,
conversation
yeah,
to be like,
yeah.
what do you want to be?
What are you going to be what are you going to be when you grow up? He goes, well, I'm going to do this, and then I want to eventually apply to the airlines, and I want to fly commercial airplanes. I'm like, the ones we flew over on from New York? Yeah, I'm like, those guys make a lot of money. He goes, they do. I go, you're going to do that? I mean, it was the funny, he's like, I got to call your mother right now and send you back to her, because I don't know if I can do this for the next 20 years of my
Well, at least
life.
at that point, he must have known you weren't marrying him for
Yeah,
future
that's-
possibilities.
No,
He's
and
like,
I-
I don't know, I thought we were going to live off my teaching salary.
That's kind of what I loved. She was so naive and sheltered that she would say stuff, and I'd look at her cross-eyed, like, okay, she's yanking my chain. Nope. She would just say stuff, and I'm like, did that honestly come out of your mouth, really? Like, her town, diversity, are Catholics. It's Universalists, Episcopalians, it's
Methodists.
just, white
Yeah.
Protestant up there.
Right.
She goes to school and meets her first Jewish person.
Yeah.
So she brings her Jewish friend a Christmas ornament. And her friend goes, what am I supposed to do with this? She goes, hang it on your Christmas tree. She goes, hope I'm Jewish. She goes, what does that mean?
I did, and she goes, well, we light a menorah for 7 days, and with her Long Island accent, I go, you light cow manure on fire in your house? She goes, no, a menorah, and I literally, she's like, hysterically laughing. And I'm like, I don't understand. I'm like, do you celebrate Thanksgiving? She goes, yes, Hope, I'm American. I'm like, I'm so confused. I don't understand. So I ended up going to her wedding. Oh my Lord.
First Long Island Jewish wedding.
It was a smaller world.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
And I literally grew up under a rock. Now when I'm out and I'm like, and we've been all over the world now, and I'm like experienced so many different things, and I look back and I'm like, oh my God, what a sheltered life I had. But we ran around barefoot, never locked our doors. When my parents sold their house, we didn't have keys to the front door.
Sure.
So they had to have all the doors and everything changed.
Wow.
Because it was so safe up there. And he would freak out when he would come up and stay at my parents' house. And
I would get up in the middle of the night and go down and lock the door. Because where I grew up, my dad had bars on the basement window and stuff.
Yeah.
You know,
Right.
he's a cop, guns everywhere.
Right.
Her house, but whose car got stolen and who called it?
so while some drunk drove my mother's car up and over the railroad tracks and parked it at his house. He only had like a
Or he
5...
drove it back to his own house?
Yeah.
So I guess you could
It was
find
literally, you could
criminal.
see it, but,
Yeah.
but it still got stolen, and I told you it was going to happen.
Because we always left the keys in our car too.
Yeah.
And
I
so
know,
it was
well.
literally he didn't want to walk the rest of the 5 minutes up the road, and they found it and brought it back.
Your generation, by and large, always kind of had like more of a humility, like it had like of a more humbling experience.
Right.
I mean, when you were just talking about cars and how that motivated you, lousy cars when you were growing up were lousy.
Yeah.
You know, they'd
Oh,
be like
yeah.
rusted out for sure.
I
Like,
had a gas tank that only had be quarter full, so I had 2 cans of gas in the back, like
Yeah.
dying from the fumes.
Yeah.
The whole side was crushed in. You'd lift the hood, you could actually see the ground because it had very few parts.
yeah, I
They
remember
weren't, like,
people like had
emission tests.
cars that
Yeah.
would need like someone would have to
Yeah.
push it as they turn the
Yeah.
ignition,
Oh,
you
yeah.
know. So things have come a long way. And then what you were
Yep.
talking about growing up with, so 3 sisters.
No, I have 4 sisters.
4 sisters.
4 sisters, yeah.
Right, with your mom in the position that she was in.
Yep.
You know, my family will sometimes talk about they'd get like a gift for Christmas,
Yeah.
right? Things were just so much different. How do you think that affected you growing up, coming of age, starting your own family and seeing how things have changed in this country? Do you think that helped you having that experience? Does it create any baggage that you still contend with?
I feel like I'm very appreciative because my mother ended up starting a business and putting her girls through college, and it gave me I was the first one to graduate from college. I think Brian was too. I don't think I have baggage other than the sense that I have sent him like a few things that like, oh, my grandmother gave me that, you know what I mean?
Sure.
Those type sentimental things. And whenever we head back home, once in a while we go back up there, and it's really good to see the humble beginnings, and it makes you appreciate what I have now. But I don't really think I think it affected me in a better way. Because I knew that what I wanted to achieve and what I wanted to give my boys and what I wanted their life to be. And I think that that's been a good thing. What about you? Do you think?
Well, my dad was Eastern European, so it was, don't speak until you're spoken to, and this is as high as your voice ever got, and God help you if you reach for something on the table, you got a fork in the back of the hand, and, being a cop, if I stepped out of line, I'd get the belt, and that was that big police belt, So I
take the belt over the fork to the back of the hand.
Yeah, well, and
That's a brutal choice, too.
and he never meant to do it, but he was always like, when you would do something, he'd go, "That's good, but let me show you a better way. That's good, but here's a better." So I always grew up thinking I couldn't do anything or I wasn't good enough. So it kind of made me an overachiever. And then I got to college and I'm in ROTC and all of a sudden I'm, getting promotions and winning these awards. I'm like, holy cow, I can do things.
Right.
But I had that mindset of I can't, and it made me, I would get a 99 on a test and I would come home and go up my room and punch something because I missed that 100. And I knew my dad was going to say, well, if you studied harder, you would have got 100. And it just drove me to the point where I almost had an ulcer by in 9th grade.
When I met him, he used to drink Pepto-Bismol by the gallons.
Bottle.
Oh gosh.
Yes. He doesn't anymore.
Okay.
Good.
But it, like I said, better or worse, it made me an overachiever. So it is what it is. You're not going to change your life. You just deal with it and move along.
So let's move it along a little bit and talk about some of your first experiences getting into the workforce, right? So you have this conversation. What are we going to do with our lives? He decides he wants to become a pilot. And I know you get into teaching, but does that start at the beginning of your story, Hope? Or
Yeah, I was always going to be a teacher.
Okay.
So that my very first job, Everything is always.
Literally, I need to write a book.
You do need to write a book. So we moved to California,
Okay.
and he says to me, I go to this job fair. He goes, your job is to come home with a job. I walk in, the very first table offers me a job.
Wow.
I took it. And I came home.
Mission accomplished.
Brian
Oh,
goes,
it gets better.
where did you get a job? I'm like, I don't know, some place called Dos Palos. Brian goes, Hope, do you even know where that is? I'm like, no, you told me to get a job. I got a job. He goes, Hope, it's an hour away from here.
I mean, I got this map out. It's like I unfold it. I'm looking around. I'm like, unfold it again.
What was it a job for?
Teaching.
Teaching.
Oh, to teach.
I was a
Okay.
teaching
Yeah,
job.
at least she was at the teaching.
Yeah, just wanted
to make
not
sure.
just
There's like
any old
100
job.
schools within 10 miles of us. She gets one
Right.
an hour away.
Right,
I
okay.
said, did you not ask where it was?
No, you told me to get a job.
Now, did you stick to your commitment? Did you
Yes, I
work it?
did.
You
I drove for 1 year. I drove it there, and then with California, where we're in the San Joaquin Valley,
Okay.
Merced, Atwater, where all the crops are, and all the migrants are working and picking the crops and everything. And I was on my way to work in zero visibility fog.
Bad fog out there.
And I was hit at 60 miles an hour. I went underneath a semi truck, totaled the car. And so at the end of the year, I got a job that was 5 minutes down the road.
Were you okay in that
I was
collision?
totally fine. The guy drove off and left me there. My glasses ended in the back seat. My shoes flew off my feet. But it was one of those things where he tells me to do something,
Yeah.
and I do it. And it's been like that my entire life. So
But what I've learned is I literally have to tell her what to do.
Like, be
I
more
can't I
specific.
can't leave any gray.
Right.
Because when she fills in the blanks, I don't know what I'm getting.
So we taught in California, then I taught in Maine. And then we went to New Jersey, and I substituted in New Jersey. But I also had 2 kids at that point, and I wanted to stay home. So Brian worked 2 jobs, American Airlines, that's when he first got hired by them, and then he would go to the Guard, and I was home with the kids, and we only had 1 car. And we definitely sacrificed during that. We emptied our money jar. Our parents would come visit, and they would bring diapers, and we're like, yes, the diaper god came.
Right.
So we.
Wait, where was all the big airline money?
Oh, that was, the first
the
year
first
he made
couple years.
$20,000 with American
Yeah.
Airlines the first year.
It was
Oh, no kidding.
slim pickings.
And we were living in New Jersey.
Now, was it still prestigious to be a pilot? You know, I know in the 60s it was a big deal.
Yeah, I mean, if you remember way back when they did deregulation in the late 70s, they split it. It was called A scale and B scale. So for the first 5 years, it was pretty sparse. But once you hit that 6-year point, the big raises kicked in.
Okay.
So the first couple of years, I was making 18,000, 20,000, then 30,000, then 35,000, which
How many hours would you be in the air getting that kind of money?
we would fly 75, but I could fly 3 hours to Miami and then sit 6 hours. So
Okay.
my days were 14, sometimes 16 hours long,
Okay.
but
When you say fly 75, you mean days?
75 hours.
Hours.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Would be a shift?
Well, like this, the way my schedule worked is I'd fly New York, Miami, sit for 2 or 3 hours, Miami, Dallas. So that was maybe 4 or 5 hours of flying, then a couple hours of sit time. Next day I'd go Dallas, LA, Denver, so it was like usually 3 and 4 day trips. So I was gone 3-4 days.
Yes,
home
I was
2,
gonna
3
ask you,
days.
was gone a
Yeah.
lot.
Yeah.
Right.
And then my days off, I'd be flying for the Air National Guard to try to be able to make extra money. So I would come in, strip off the blue suit, put on the green suit, back out the door. And the kids would just go, they knew where I was going by the color of outfit I wore. But sometimes I'd come home, dump my suitcase, fill it, and just run right back out the door again.
Holy
So
smokes.
it was
we
a rough
didn't have
5
any
years.
family near us because everybody still lived in New York, and my mom still had 4 younger kids at home. So we were basically on our own, and they did what they could. I mean, Brian's mom and dad were great. They would come and bring us stuff. My mom always brought me diapers, always brought me wipes, always bought me baby food, and it was just one of those things. We look back at that and laugh because one time Brian had saved up money. He's like, it's our anniversary. We're going to go out to dinner. We asked our very wealthy neighbors next to us. They worked for Campbell's Soup. They were executives to go to Chez Vachon. So we go in and
I should have known right off the bat just from the name. We shouldn't have gone.
So there's this piano guy playing and we sit down and we open our menus and Brian goes, do you see the prices? I'm like, no, I don't see the prices. He goes, Hope, they're on the right side of the menu where the prices are. I'm like, Brian, I can see. He goes, give me your menu. He goes, you don't have prices. I look at his menu. I'm like, $50 for the salad bar?
Now, this was 1992.
Yeah.
Wow.
So $50 just for the salad bar.
We had water. I'm like, do we have to pay for the water? We got up and walked out.
So they had a different
did
menu
you?
for the women? Is
Yes.
that what that
Yeah.
was?
Yeah. Because it was like,
that was a move that they
Yeah.
did the price.
it was
to
like
the men.
$75 a plate. $50 just for the salad bar.
Right.
Yeah.
So we literally.
That's like $7,000.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we got up and walked out, and we found this quaint little place, and we had the best time. And we laugh about this.
I mean, today we could go in there just, whatever.
Yeah,
But
right.
back then, that was like a month's
He's
worth of
like,
money.
we laugh. There was like something, and it was like Madagascar peppercorn. Brian goes, they didn't fly to Madagascar for those peppercorns.
That's right.
So we
But
always,
if you call that, you can charge more.
to
for
this
it.
day, we laugh. I'm like, oh, Madagascar peppercorns.
So there's a little bit of a detail I want to make sure that we get out here. So when you're saying you're starting a family, right? There's 2 boys. How old were you when you started having kids?
27.
Yeah. So that
We married young.
yeah.
We married at 23. And Jordan was born in Caribou, Maine. We had just left California. He was born in Caribou, Maine. And he was only like 6 months old, and Brian went to the first Gulf War. So I'm in Caribou, Maine, and it's 40 below up there, and I'm out
180
there.
inches of snow.
He was born up there, so I'm out there snow blowing, pregnant, cursing him. I can't even tell you. It was the best time. We have the best friends from up there, but it is God's country up there.
Yeah.
I called him one day from the base, and I'm like, oh, our dog is going crazy. Someone's horse is in the backyard. It ended up being a moose.
So the California to Maine move, is that strictly just because of the military?
Yeah.
Yeah, every 3 years, usually you move to another
Okay.
assignment.
Yeah.
So we wanted to be closer to home, and we were looked into the upstate New York base, but there was no opening, so the next closest one was Maine.
Okay.
And nobody wanted to go there, so all I did is said, hey, can I go to Maine? I had orders like a week later.
Yeah, were you deployed to the Gulf War?
Yeah, the first one. And then I did the Panama invasion in '89. I did that one. We were sleeping, and the phone goes off, and it was a squadron. Commander goes, pack your stuff, be in the squadron in 30 minutes. I'm like, where am I going? He goes, can't tell you. Be here in 30 minutes. So I kicked her. I go, get up, pack my stuff. I got to get in the shower. She goes, where are you going? I go, I don't know. Pack me bathing suits, all my Arctic gear. I have no idea where I'm going. So about 5 days later, I called up and said, can't tell you where I am.
But if you're watching the
If
news,
you watch the news, you know what I'm doing.
and that's where I was. I was pregnant at the time. So he's like, get out of bed. And we had a water bed. And my response time was a little slow.
Trying to roll the belly off the water
Yeah,
bed.
yeah.
Didn't,
Yep.
Did
And
you
that-
know if he was going to be home before the delivery?
Oh, yes. Well, he was on alert.
Okay.
So they did, he was a part of SAC, so they did a nuclear alert all the time. And so he was out, and one of his friends took over his alert, so he would go to the hospital, could be to the hospital with me. And I mean, he was right there. Yep, he was there for both of them.
And then Maine from New Jersey, that was also because you got moved down there.
Yeah, and that's
yeah,
where,
at that point, I got out of the Air Force active duty,
Okay.
and I joined the Air National Guard because I got hired by Americans. So I was going to, so we went to New Jersey, and they were switching over from fighters to what I flew, the tankers.
and that's where Connor was born, was down in New Jersey. And so that's why he's a Jersey Devils fan. And my son is a Bruins fan, my oldest one, and it's
Yeah.
just like rivalry.
Maine.
Yeah, exactly.
So we bounced around, quite a bit, and it was great for our marriage because when we had an issue, she couldn't run to mommy, I couldn't, so we had to figure it out,
Yeah.
And when something blew up, we had to join hands and climb the mountain together,
Right.
Because nobody was there to help us,
Sure.
And so that's what made us stress. So there's really nothing life can throw at us at this point. We're like, "Pff, whatever.
No, we just laugh. And the best part is we still laugh about how dumb some of these things are, like our first fight. I mean, I'm
I
like,
wouldn't eat pizza at 3 a.m.
How dare
That was
you.
our biggest fight. in
allegedly
40 years.
alcohol was involved.
Allegedly,
We almost
my
got
wife had
divorced
one
because
too.
Mike wouldn't bring me to Taco Bell one time at 2 a.m. And I'm still actually kind of mad about that, even though that was a long time.
She was like, let's get a pizza. I'm like, oh, it's 3 a.m. I'm going to bed. She's like, I want a pizza. I go, then get a pizza. She goes, no, I want you to eat with me. I go, I don't need to eat with you.
Right.
Yes, you need to eat with me.
Right.
So finally she storms off and goes to bed. And so I get in bed and she goes, get out of the bed. I go, why? You're here, never here, and I'm always here. I said, Hope, I'm here like a quarter of the time, so I'll just take a quarter of the bed. So then she jumps up and runs to the other room, goes on the couch, and like, okay, I'm sitting there, okay. won't be long. 3 minutes later, she comes back in. Oh no, you get out of bed. Said, if you don't get in bed, I'm going to kill you right now.
That's my best advice for every single. And I always tell my kids, you got to laugh at how stupid you are some days, and some days you just are totally. I'm totally irrational, like crazy, mommy tsunami craziness. You know what I mean? And then you just own your craziness, and now you just laugh.
Right. It doesn't sound like that fight was about pizza. It sounded like you just wanted to spend time with them.
She was guilty. She wanted pizza, but she was guilty. She
It
didn't want
was
to
about
eat it.
pizza.
Yeah.
I didn't want to eat it. I didn't want to eat it alone.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's also
Yeah.
like probably about like 4 Manhattans or whatever.
Yeah.
No, back then I didn't. You know, the one regret when we lived in California was Napa Valley was so close to us. We drank beer. We just got out of college. We
Yeah.
didn't drink. We drank Boone's Farm or Arbor Mist. You know what I mean?
Sure.
It was
All
gross.
those great wines out there. We dive for today.
And we've never gone to Napa Valley. We should have did that while we were there.
Yeah.
But it was great because not having kids for 4 years. It was, I'd call her up and say, hey, I got it home from my flight early, meet you right after work. So every Friday we were out doing something with all our friends because it was
Yeah.
all young lieutenants and young captains and hardly anybody had any kids. So it was like party central.
Things started to get really where we could travel and had a little bit extra money was we were down in Virginia. I got hired right away as a teacher, and the kids came to school with me, so they got to ride. Well, Connor didn't, but I stayed home with Connor until he was 4. And then a friend of mine who was a teacher ended up with a daycare, so she took Connor a couple days when he wasn't flying, and it was good. And then I had money, Brian was making more money, so that's when we started traveling a little bit with the kids. And the kids, like one of the very first times they learned to swim, we were in
St. Thomas.
St. Thomas, yeah, and I took him out on a mat and took him snorkeling for the first time, and so we started to be able to do things like that. They got to sit in first class, and they were ruined from that day on.
Oh, yeah.
And they came back, and my mother-in-law, who lives on Long Island, I'm going to take you to one of the most beautiful beaches in the world, Jones Beach. Everybody in the world knows about Jones Beach, and my kids go, Tita, this water's dirty.
I'm not getting
Why-
into dirty water.
Where's the Caribbean blue?
Why isn't it pretty blue? She calls it because your kids are brats.
It's so hard too, right? Where both of you came from such humble beginnings. So when you have kids, you can provide for your kids more than your parents were able to do for you. But where's the line?
But that's one of the things we struggled with. We didn't want to shortchange them, but we always made sure that they worked. They had jobs at 14, 15. They were at McDonald's, and from the time they were little kids, they would go to buy something. I go, is that an asset or is that a liability? And they'd look at it, and I go, is that going to put money in your pocket or take money out of your pocket? Or they'd say, can I have that? I go, I'll tell you what, if you wait till tomorrow, I'll buy you 3. By tomorrow, they'd forget. So you teach them delayed gratification. And I'd never forget my one son, he was like 12. And they were doing savings accounts or something in junior high. And he comes in, he's like, hey, Dad. I go, what? He goes, we were doing finances today. I said, and the teacher said we should put our money in a savings account. So I said, why would I want to do that? When I could buy a tax lien certificate at 18%. He didn't know what I was talking about. I go, bingo. Teachers don't know all the answers. He's 12.
One of my favorite stories is both my boys worked at the McDonald's on 2nd Street here in Manchester.
Oh, okay.
And they started when they were 14. And Brian signed him up for a 401k. And so when he came here to you guys, I think Justin goes, how do you have this much money in a 401k at your age? She goes, my dad's a jerk. And I've been putting into a 401k since I was 14 years old.
That's
wild. He goes, I don't know many kids this age who have that much money in a 401k. He goes, yeah, I get it now, but at the time, I didn't like my dad.
Right.
But that's always, and both of them were the same exact way. Because we had nothing. I didn't even know how to balance. Finances for me were like foreign. I didn't have any financial independence or knowledge at all. And Brian's the one who's helped me, taught me, and he's been so good with the kids ever since they were little. To this day, they have one credit card. They pay it off every month. And when Connor went to get his house, he almost didn't qualify because he didn't have credit.
Yeah.
But he had a whole bunch of money
Right.
in other things.
Sorry,
asset.
don't carry debt like
Yeah.
I
everyone
don't
else.
carry debt. And they're like, that's not right. You need to have some debt. So we got a credit card. He would go to 7-Eleven, he would buy a Slurpee, go home and pay it off because he had to show that he was actually building credit by using that. And he still, to this day, he saves and does it that way.
It's great. What
It-
great lessons.
Yeah, we didn't have any of those lessons.
Well, our generation were kind of, I'll use the word screwed, because our parents, they had Social Security, their pension, and whatever they saved. And they could live very well off of that.
Sure.
All of a sudden, our generation, and I actually read a book by the guy who came out with the 401k plan. A 401k was never supposed to take the place of a pension. It was supposed to be another addition. But corporations got to look at that and they said, hey, if we can get rid of these pensions. So all of a sudden, every American became an investor with no financial education whatsoever. None of us were taught this stuff in school. So what do most people do? They're so scared of it, they don't even touch it and nothing happens, or they just stick it in some, target fund or whatever. And I went back and just literally taught myself finances. I went back to ancient Lycia from when they minted the first coin and went to Athens. Okay, why did Athens collapse? Why did the Romans collapse? And you can see, how when governments get control of it, they just spend it and then they devalue it, and then the economy and basically the country collapses. And it just happens time after time. The British, the Dutch, the Spanish, and we're going to be no different. You can see it happening now.
Sure.
So, and millions of Americans are entering, the baby boomers especially, retirement age, and they don't have a clue. And then when I started looking, okay, I've got 10 years to retire, and I start looking at retirement, I thought my head was going to explode. I thought it was complicated before, just learning stocks and options and calls and puts and all that stuff. And that's when I started looking for a financial, because I'm like, I don't want to spend my retirement years doing this junk. I said, I just spent the last 30 years doing it.
Right.
I want to sitting on the beach and learn how to surf and whatnot. And, and I dragged her to every financial seminar known to man. And, we went.
Good times.
Yeah, we went and visited. Hey, free chicken dinner, right?
Right.
No.
You just listen to this guy drone on.
Oh, she hated
I
it.
hated
She
every minute of
hated it. But I was like, I'll take you out for drinks later. That's the only way I got her
Yeah.
out.
But, we went through we went through our good times, our hard times, good decisions, bad decisions. And through all of it, there were times where it was frustrating. But in the end, we always worked together.
Sure.
No matter what. I'm like, okay, so here's what we'll do. We'll buckle our belt here. And we look back at it. And like the kids will say, I remember you guys went through a tough time. And I remember you and
What was
Dad.
that 2008 crash?
Yeah.
I had 3 houses, 2 rental properties. And sort of like COVID, all of a sudden the crash happened. And all of a sudden your tenants who had, manual labor jobs, everybody was out of work. Nobody. So I went from collecting money to paying 3 mortgages.
Right.
Yeah.
And I did, what the experts said. I had 3 or 4 months in, reserve and everything else. But after 6, and then you find out that as a landlord, you don't really own your house. On
Right.
paper you do, but the tenants own your house.
Sure.
And you go to these courts, especially in the Northeast, and we had one guy who was just an expert. I mean, every time we'd get a court date, he'd file a piece of paper that said, I turned his electricity off. No, the electricity company turned your electricity. So he was in there almost a year before we could get him out, and we were on the verge of bankruptcy. So we got, finally the boys were in private school, and I said, look, something's going to break here. I said, we have to make some decisions. And we sat down and said, okay, here's these 3 houses. We can keep one. Which one do you want to keep? And we credit card debt up here because I was just trying to keep these mortgages paid.
You had that discussion as a family too?
Not with the boys. They were a little young.
Because they were in high school and we didn't want to stress them out.
Sure.
But the worst part was this professional guy who was a shyster. Brian's on a trip and he's like, I just got a notice that we have a court hearing today. I'm like, I never got dressed so fast in my life.
Right.
I've never been in court before.
Yeah.
And and he called me Satan's sister by the time I was done. I'm like, we're doing this. We've never done this. We've never done this. He goes, you have until this afternoon to get out of that house. And I went over to the police and I got the keys and I go out. He had a full-size turkey living in the house.
What?
A giant white turkey, like
giant
as tall
white
as I am, was in our basement.
I was like,
Why?
and I'm like, oh my gosh.
I don't know.
So now we ended up getting him out, and literally the house was trash. So we emptied everything out. We got it all fixed up. We sold it, and He goes, I want my turkey back. I'm like, I fed it to the guy who bought the house. That
We
turkey's
did.
gone. But I'm like, it was such a learning curve. And to this day, we will never own property because we had no rights.
Right.
No rights. He's like, and I'm like, this is why the electric bill. He had a cord running from the house out to this little shed where this turkey was living.
Yeah, I was paying to heat his turkey. Yeah, it's like landlord nightmares. That was it.
Yeah.
And so I said, that's it. I'm done. And like I said, we saved ourselves. We never declared bankruptcy. And then, okay, we paid off the credit cards. We did this, we did that. And then, when the housing market had completely crashed in 2012, we had enough saved. Credit was rebuilt that I said, okay, now's the time to buy. So we bought in New Boston for, a steal, and we sold it 8 years later for
Some odd thousand.
25,000
But
more than we bought
I
it
mean,
for.
we had good times, and even through the bad times, we still had fun. We still laughed. We did not travel. We cut back on everything that we needed to do. The boys stayed in private school because that was important to us. And it also, moving up here, I had so many years experience teaching. It took me 3 years to find a job
They wouldn't hire her.
because I had too many years experience, and I come in.
You're overqualified.
How can you be overqualified as a teacher?
She taught at Beach Street, which half the schools speak Spanish. She speaks Spanish.
Yeah.
The grades in her class went up 30%. The principal is begging the superintendent to keep her.
Yeah.
She's the only teacher who spoke Spanish on the staff.
Wow.
And then they said, nope, she's too expensive. They hired some kid right out of college who didn't
Yeah.
speak Spanish. So when they tell you they care about the kids, they don't.
So
This is why your kids went to private school.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
And so it was one of those things where it was, we thought, because everywhere I went, I got hired on the first job or interview I went to, even at Dos Palos. But it was one of those things, I'm like, I couldn't believe, I was subbing every day. I did long-term. I picked up jobs like that. So I was always working, but it wasn't a teacher's salary.
When did you learn Spanish?
I went to school to be a Spanish teacher.
You did? Okay.
And then when I met Brian, because he's always been in control of he looked at my schooling. He goes, there's only one Spanish teacher in a school. If you take one more class, then you could teach in an you'll have a dual certification, elementary through high school. So I took one more class, and I ended up. So he took control of my life from. Which
You do
is
follow instructions really well.
Yeah,
He's
I
like,
did.
you take one more class.
class.
You're like,
You
okay.
just take this class. So I did, and that's how I ended
In
up.
my spare time, I was checking your schedule.
While we're still on the topic of raising a family, you shared some photos with us as part of this experience, right? There's one right behind
Yeah,
you.
our kids got us that. Oh, that was when they were little. Yeah.
How old are the boys there?
We're in Virginia, so probably 10. And
I'd
eight?
say 5 and 7.
Yeah.
And those are always really good years because they're out of diapers and
Oh,
not
yeah.
just like trying to
Yes.
lick electrical outlets and that sort of thing, right?
Well,
You-
that would depend. I would come home from
Really?
a trip. Yeah.
Okay.
Our whole basement was lined with this beautiful padding insulation.
Yeah.
So I come home from a trip and my gun safe was downstairs. So I went downstairs I look and the entire basement got Z's cut in it.
Okay.
So my
What do you-
boys were playing Zorro with their hockey sticks down the basement and slashed the basement to pieces.
Yes.
So my words are, what the hell are you doing while I'm gone?
Yeah.
They were playing. They were having a good time.
Yeah, so long as they're quiet. So
Right.
when they're quiet, you need to check on them.
And we had built, this was our very first house we built. So we picked it out, designed it, and we were probably in there 4 weeks. And I was teaching, and I was making lunches. Brian's on a trip, and I hear, we're going down, save the ship, bail, bail, bail. I walk up the stairs, and there is water on the landing and on the brand new carpet. And I open the door, and I put the coat rack through the sheetrock of the brand new house. And
So
I'm like,
now I've got ruined carpets and a giant hole in the wall.
I'm like, what are you doing?
Wait, where was the water coming from?
They were
kid-
bailing out of the
They
tub.
were playing pirates.
They were playing
bailing
pirate.
it
They
out
were
of the
taking their buckets and bailing out the tub.
So
So I
then-
had about 30 gallons of water running on the upper landing.
It's it's boys.
Sure.
They
Oh,
just
yeah.
never
100%.
ever. And the worst part was I didn't tell Brian to put a hole through the sheetrock,
Mm-hmm.
so it took him 4 months to find it. Because I'm like, I just can't right now. I can't
Right.
tell him because he's
It's too
gonna-
much. I'm
he's
going to give it the news and
sure
pieces.
taught them a lesson.
Yeah, I did.
Are there any other classic boys stories or Bailey family traditions that should be
Oh, every
cataloged here?
Christmas we used to save the tubes from the wrapping paper and have a ginormous fight.
Okay. Yeah, those
And-
are awesome.
Yeah.
Those make
You were
great
getting
swords.
in the
Yeah.
middle of it too.
Oh my God,
yeah.
all of us, yes. I would say we'd each have two. We literally would chase each other
Yeah,
through
it's
that.
like our family sport is the boys torturing their mothers.
Yes.
Pretty much it.
Yes. Well, those pictures right there behind Jess and Mike, they got us the king and queen pictures for Christmas this year.
Okay. Is that how they think of you guys, do you think?
They
Or is
do,
this
yeah.
an ironic
Yeah,
gesture?
they do.
And
Yeah.
then this is after they confetti cannoned me. They are constantly torturing me. I do puzzles, just like 1,000-piece puzzles all the time. They always come in the house and hide one piece on me.
No.
Yes.
That's like torture.
Well, when we moved from New Boston, we had the house painted. The guy comes in with a handful of puzzle pieces. He goes, I'm finding these all over the house, and they're all high up. We went, Connor.
Connor would take it, he'd put him on top of like a windowsill,
Ceiling fans.
ceiling, any place that he could hide a piece of my puzzle.
So we had like 20 boxes of puzzles missing one piece.
One piece, just one piece, I could kill him. So that their sport is torturing their mother.
Okay.
Good
But
on.
they had a good life. We traveled,
It's a sign of affection, though, Hope.
Yeah,
is,
it
it
was.
is.
They just, that's kind of the way our family is.
Well, and they ended up marrying girls who grew up like I did, and the girls are like, you boys don't realize
They would get angry with them.
how lucky your lives were. But we made them toe the line. They had to mow the lawn. They had to do this. But we never threw it in their face like, you guys get all of this because we work. So we weren't like that.
Sure.
They just were able to do things. You know what I mean? They each got a car. Good story. Jordan got a beautiful Subaru Baja. It was used because we usually don't buy brand new cars. He had it about 2 weeks. He skipped school. We made him clean it. We took it back to the Subaru dealer, and he drove a 1996 Geo Prism that leaked.
And rattled and shook.
Shook, yep.
Yeah, you're not such a chick magnet arn.
Wow.
So
For
Yeah.
one day skipping school.
Oh, yeah.
I said, I don't pay for private school and car payments for you because it was a 30-minute drive and it just
Yeah.
was a hassle for us. It was
Sure.
once he learned to drive, he and his brother and off they would go. And, he just cut school one day. And I'm like,
First time he ever did anything wrong.
Yeah, I mean, he
It
was on
really
the
was,
honor
yeah.
society. I mean, captain of the lacrosse team.
Right.
Yeah, he was always
And
good.
of course,
Yeah,
his brother's
you
so
get nipped that in the
sympathetic.
bud.
Go, hey, knucklehead, how did that work for you?
So I think you guys took a lot of lessons from both your childhoods and then your experiences in raising children. If you had to say, like, what stands out to you most as lessons that future generations should try to honor, right? Or values that you hope your boys take with them as they start their own families. What do you hope that, you guys help to foster continues on from all these experiences?
I think mostly we wanted them to be good people. So for like the boys, duty, honor, country, if you choose to get married, be a good father. Being a good father and a husband means sacrifice. You put yourself last. Your wife, your children, whatever they need comes first. If there's anything left over, hey, that's yours. But if you make that choice, you're making a commitment to her that she's going to have whatever she needs, to raise your legacy. And hard work, honesty. I think we're probably one of them snatched something from a store one time.
Oh,
Typical.
no, they both did. They came out of Lowe's with their jean pockets soaking wet.
They were in the fountain.
They were stealing the money out of the fountain. And I'm like,
For the 401k.
Yeah.
yeah. I said, why?
Both of them, shorts, soaking wet. I'm
I'm like,
running
why
right
are
down
you
their
all
leg.
wet?
How old were they?
Like 5 and 3.
Okay.
And who was supposed to be watching them?
We were both shopping. We were buying plants.
You're the mother. You're supposed to be watching them.
So I'm like, why are your pants all that? We found all the silver. We took all the silver coins.
Yeah, they left the pennies.
They left the pennies.
They went right for the
smart.
silver.
I'm like, back in the store and empty your pockets back in there.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's called stealing.
Right.
I'm like, what is wrong with you?
I call that an opportunity.
But luckily, knock on wood, they were in the military in high school, so they grew up, right? And the one thing I always said to Brian when we first were talking, when I knew I was going to marry him, but he didn't know he was going to marry
I
me.
mean, on week 3.
Yeah. I said, as a parent, I want to make sure I tell my kids every single day that I love them. I want them to know.
Because that was something our parents, that generation didn't do that. I mean, you knew they did, but
Right.
they never said it ever. I mean, to this day, when
I-
my mother and I hug, it's like one of those type things.
Yeah, where every single time I hang up the phone with them, I love you, and we always end our conversation that way. If they're leaving, I always get a hug, and I wanted them to be that way with their spouses or their significant others, and they are. I wanted them to grow up in a loving, fun atmosphere.
And to this day, we have a good relationship. We go on, like Connor and Kristen are coming down to Ecuador next week. you know.
Nice.
And the boys and I do a fishing trip twice a year. Just us doing, father-son stuff.
That's great.
And when we went, Mexico, was it? Where did we get that big boat?
Mexico.
We were in Mexico, and Connor's wife, once again grew up very poor, and she was like, "Dad, I just want to lay on the front of a boat." So we rented a fishing boat, and the boys and I did fishing, and these two were laying on the front
of the boat.
Front of the boat.
Pretending we were wealthy.
On your own private yacht?
Yeah, that's what it was.
So let's talk about retirement a little bit, because this is a new frontier for you guys,
Yeah,
right?
2 months.
Yeah.
Wow,
So
very nice.
how's it been so far?
Loving it.
And
Great.
what are your plans for this year?
Julie?
I'm the travel planner, and that is one thing that we both love to do. I don't know why. He flew his entire life, and I keep putting him back on airplanes. So we usually take a couple trips of the year. We're leaving this Friday. We're going to Ecuador for a month. Then we're going to Panama for 2 weeks. Then we're going to the Dominican Republic. And in September, we are going to go, we've done northern Italy, the middle of Italy. We're going to go to Sorrento, and I found a place already for 10 days. And we're just going to go out from there. We're going to go to Positano. We're going to go to Mount Vesuvius. We're going to go to the Amalfi Coast. Pompeii. We're going to go to Capri. And I plan it all. It takes me forever. I research it. I get us train tickets. I do everything. So that's what we do, other than spending time with our kids. But everybody's like, "Are you going to be okay? Brian's going to be home." I'm like, "Yeah, we did COVID together. It was great. We gained 20 pounds, but we did COVID together."
I remember Fat Brian.
Still trying to get rid of a lot of that. Still trying to get rid of
So
it.
it has been. I retired when I was 57 because I was teaching in Ware, and we moved up to Lake Winnipesaukee, and I wasn't going to commute. I did it for 1 year. So now I substitute at Interlakes Elementary School, and I love it there. It's the greatest little school, and I work the days I don't, and I work when I want to, and it's great.
That's cool.
So I'm still with kids and getting out there and laughing because they keep you young. And during the summer, living on the lake, there's always something fun. Even now, pond hockey's coming, the ice runway's open.
And then it's just a parade of your family all summer long.
Oh, yes. So but retirement has been great. But what I like the most is Brian's relaxed. He doesn't have to get up and get going, go through the whole hassles of driving to Boston, getting on a flight because he was based out of New York, going to New York, wondering if he's going to get home, dealing with the garbage that you're dealing with nowadays. And so he's totally relaxed now.
How do you think he made that transition? Because I remember very distinctly there were times where Brian wasn't very relaxed. So
No.
What was the catalyst to getting him towards more of a serene kind of way of life here?
This is honestly, believe it or not, this is my normal state when I don't have something that I need to be intense about. I mean, I usually sit on the couch and not say a word for a week. You give me an iPad and I'm done. I don't need anything. I don't need to talk to anybody. I don't need to do anything. She's the one that always has to be going. It just, I loved flying, but it got to the point where it became a job.
Yeah.
And how do I say this diplomatically? The newer pilots they're hiring don't have the aviation skills and background that I had. I grew up in the stick and rudder days where you pulled the stick and the actually cables went to the controls and you could feel it. Now it's all electronics and fly-by-wire. And the Air Force, they took us up and spun us for hours. Okay, how do you get out of a spin? Upside down, right side up, formation flying, instrument flying. A lot of the military pilots, the military shrunk so much, there's not that many anymore. Like my class, there was 13 of us, 12 are ex-military. Now you go to a class, maybe 1 or 2 will be military. You know, so you don't know the civilian background of these people, how they were trained. Where in the military, it's a program, everybody knows, everybody goes through the same thing. And I think we started out with 70 and only ended up with 35. It was like an old World War II movie. And every time you come into class, somebody was missing.
This has been pretty common for people in your generation where the last 5 or 10 years has been a big cultural shift around the workplace.
Yeah, it's the whole, everybody gets their feelings hurt now. I mean, God, the old crusty captains I had, they turn around and, hey, dumbass, you know, I mean, there was no, I could tell you stories, not on here, you know, but nowadays you could not get away with that stuff.
Sure.
You know, and people getting reported to HR constantly and everything over the littlest thing. And I'm like, I'm done with this, you know. And then, of course, the clientele we're flying around these days. You know, when we flew as kids, it was suits, ties, and you said, yes, ma'am, to the stewardess because there were no guys. And if you didn't, either she smacked her, your parents smacked her, whoever was closer.
Sure.
You know, now it's just mass transportation now.
So your stress was coming from work.
Yeah. I mean, she gives me no stress whatsoever most of the time. You know,
No,
and financially, we haven't been stressed for years. It was all work related.
I've been meaning to get this word in the entire time you guys have been talking. You two, I mean, I work with a lot of couples, right? And money is a very hot, like it's a hot button topic with people. It usually gets crosswords and emotions come out. I don't think I've ever seen you two be cross with each other or even like remotely close to upset. It's kind of a beautiful thing watching
I
you
don't
two
think
operate.
we've ever had a real fight. I mean, we have the stupid things like the pizza thing,
pizza.
maybe 3 or 4 of those.
Support that.
Or the
That's
time
real,
you
Brian.
flipped me off. That got a little serious.
Oh yeah. So that was our very first thing. This is ladies. He wasn't folding the towels correctly.
Oh,
So
Not that I was doing laundry. I wasn't folding them the right way.
Brian,
I
I'm
just
appalled.
literally had
I'm
this
appalled.
conversation at lunchtime
Yeah.
today.
you did?
Yeah, about it wasn't towels, but it was about like how your husband like tries to clean, but you're not cleaning right.
Right.
And you can't
Exactly.
be happy enough that he's
No.
cleaning at
Yeah.
all. It's like
It has to
you don't
be
do it
your
unless
way
you
of
do
cleaning.
it the right way.
And it has to
right.
be on your time schedule.
right.
And
We have the towel fight.
So
too.
I flipped him off, and Brian's eyes are always like this. They got like this big around,
You
like,
said they were like blue fireballs.
and he looked at me. He goes,
I came towards you.
Yeah, and he goes, I promise you, I will never, ever strike you. I will never call you in an inappropriate name. But if you ever stick that finger up again, I will take you over my knee and I will spank your ass. And I'm like, I literally started crying. I went, bah! And I mean, and people are like, he was folding towels. I know. I fold them in a square. He folded them in thirds. Mm-hmm. We now fold our towels in thirds.
Okay.
I ended up liking his way better.
Story of our life.
We were probably married a couple months, and that he was folding towels wrong.
All right, I understand how you guys flirt. This makes sense. So you've made the transition. Was the transition into retirement one that came with some trepidation, or has it been? It sounds like you've been more excited. Again, and a lot of people have difficulty navigating this transition, right? So would you have any words of wisdom to share with other people maybe in the same boat or will be in your position soon? What's made it easy for you to embrace retirement?
Let me say something before you answer that.
Okay.
Brian had the hardest time retiring because, and you know Brian, he never thought we would be comfortable enough. He didn't want to lose our lifestyle. And so there was never he still doesn't, he's retired, but he was like, what if I need more money? What if we need more this? What if I need more that? I'm like, Brian, we are going to be fine. Do you remember we grew up with nothing and we were as happy as can be sitting on the couch doing nothing? If we have nothing, we're still going to be happy. You are frustrated. You need to stop. But with him, it was, do I have enough? He reads constantly. He watches the stock market and he's like, this person's retiring with $100,000 in savings. Oh my God, I don't know what I would do right now. So he never felt like we were secure enough.
Well, when you come from nothing, you look at a spreadsheet, say, okay, there's whatever, $9 million. That I can't wrap my head around. I don't know if that's enough. I don't know. I mean, if I had a list of everybody and what they're retiring with, I'd say, oh yeah, I'm doing pretty good. Okay, I can relax. But when you come from nothing and you watched your parents struggle or neighbors and family, you're looking at a number, but that doesn't compute in my mind on a light. Is that enough? Will I have enough if there's a medical issue? Can we go on 3 trips a year? You know, whatever. So until
We met Mike, and
Mike, and he could put it up there and say, "You're good."
You're like, I so much don't even care what the number says. If it just said the word enough, or
Yeah.
like you'll be okay.
Mike's
or,
the one who
you
kept
know.
saying to him, Brian, you're fine. Brian, you're and I could have
Eventually, it
told
sunk in.
I could have told him that 100 times, but until Mike told him.
Yeah.
You couldn't balance your checkbook. I'm going to take financial advice from you.
I'm also convinced it doesn't matter. Like I'll tell Mike something, and he'll be like, whatever, and then someone else will say it, and he's like, oh, that's a good point that person made. And
Yeah.
I'm like,
Yeah.
I made that point yesterday. I think that's just fun.
So
But
I
I
think
get
that's
the
it.
anxiety because you also hit the reset button in 2008.
Yeah.
That's not that long ago.
No, it's not.
So to come the distance that you have in such a short amount of time.
In 2008, we had around $1 million, a little more, $1.5 million, and it was gone. In 6 months, I not only that it was gone, I was deep in a hole.
Right.
So that was an earth shaker for me.
Yeah.
Because I had followed all the standard advice, you know, buy real estate, put this much behind to help yourself, but you know, you don't think what the laws are going to change. Or 2008 should have been a depression, and it probably by definition was pretty darn close, if not one. You know, and it shocked me financially how fast it could turn around.
Right. There's amazing wisdom, Hope, in what you were just saying about you were happy when you had nothing, and now you're happy and you've got something, right? And if you go back to nothing, it'll probably be okay. I mean, the hallmark of a great provider is worrying about those times, Brian. So that anxiety never goes away. But we talk about this a lot. I mean, right before we got married, we lived in a basement, and it wasn't a finished basement. You know, and so we've been through the leaner years, but you know, if you're listen, leaner years are going to happen again, right? You were talking about that a little bit earlier. Certainly, it's been a while since we've had hard times in this country, and we'll have hard times again. But if you are adaptable and you can recognize what really matters, and that's what I have to give you two the most credit for when you've talked about just how precious life is, Hope, and all that. I mean, you know what matters, and it's not really money. You talked about how you just constantly try to tell your kids that you love them and you guys clearly love each other and you're just trying to worry about experiences and that sort of thing. If you have that right mindset, you're already wealthier than a king. Because I like to tell people all the time, I know people with tons and tons of money who are miserable. Yeah. So when we talk about retirement, having a lot of money helps, but it's only really part of that balance sheet, like the great balance sheet that really matters. Having a spouse that you care about, you know, being able to share things together, have family that wants to visit you. I mean, that really counts for so much more.
You're already wealthy with that.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. So we're going to start to wrap things up, I think, a little bit, but we were going to do a lightning round of just some funsy questions just to see what kind of like
That's fun.
spontaneous things happen here. Jess, I don't know if you wanted to start things off, but I had a couple that I put on my list.
Sure. Go ahead.
You want me to start?
Oh, sure. I'll start. For both of you, what is the first concert you went to and the best concert you went to?
My first concert was the Flock of Seagulls and the Go-Go's. And stop laughing.
Flock of Seagulls
Yeah.
is legit. That's the I ran so far.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a great
And then
song.
they warmed up for the Go-Go's.
They did.
And
okay.
the best one I've
gotta
been
be.
to is Elton John.
Oh, nice.
My first was Charlie Daniels, and my best one,
Oh, he saw ZZ Top this year.
ZZ Top. They're my band. I've never seen them in real
Just
life.
this year?
Yeah, Guilford.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Super cool.
That was a bucket list thing.
They're old as
That's
dirt.
awesome.
Yeah, but they were still moving.
They were.
They didn't spin their guitars though. I was a little depressed about that one, but all the rest of them were good.
What's your favorite movie?
Pretty Woman.
That's a tough one. I got to go for a couple of them. They're all Mel Gibson movies. I liked
Braveheart.
Patriot, Braveheart. Nah, I don't want to say Mad Max, but I like the other two.
Braveheart's
Yeah,
great.
yeah.
If you had to be stranded on a desert island and you needed to survive and hopefully get off, what 4 people would you bring with you to try to get your way off of this
4
desert
people?
island?
Oh, to get my weight off? Or
My
if I-
family argues about this like 3 times a year.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
more.
So
I have to
I
be-
give you now this gift.
So I need to be able to get myself off, right?
Yeah, or just you don't want to
Well,
die.
I think you would want to survive.
Yeah.
Like at
Okay,
the
to
island
survive.
too. So it's not about just getting off. But,
So definitely Brian, Jordan, and Connor.
okay.
Because they're survivalists.
Yeah.
And I would bring my daughter-in-law with me because we would just sit back and watch the men work.
Okay,
So-
that's a good answer.
Definitely the two boys, because all three of us are military, have all been through survival school. In the military, you're taught, hey, make it work, improvise, adapt, overcome, find a way to make it work.
Yep.
And also, in a situation like that, your best friend could turn into your worst enemy when things get so. But with family, you don't have to worry about that as much.
Sure.
If some of the rations went missing, who would you suspect of the children went into the
Connor.
stores? Connor.
Connor.
Yeah. Makes sense.
If it was frosting, it would be Jordan.
Jordan. We used to find
frosting on the
cans of
desert island.
We used to
frosting.
hide him under his bed with a spoon.
Yeah.
She'd be
I'm
like, I know I just bought frosting for the cupcakes.
I'm
Where
like,
the hell is it?
What? He goes, if I get hungry in the middle of the night, I just take a spoon of. I'm like, that's
gross.
That is disgusting.
Frosting?
Yeah.
Last
the
stupid
best part.
question. If you were hosting a dinner party and you could invite anyone, living or dead, to join, what 3 people
3.
would you want to have show up?
Princess Diana.
Okay.
Okay.
Alexander the Great, Julius
great
Caesar,
pick.
and George Washington.
Wow. Those are some solid picks.
All the great generals.
Might be a little
Yeah.
dry, the conversation.
Princess Diana.
I would love to see Alexander the Great and Princess Di at the same table.
Yeah.
Pretty cool.
And Julia Roberts.
Yul Brenner. He was so handsome. And I don't really know. Somebody who's funny.
You gotta have somebody.
Someone's gonna
famous.
lighten the mood.
Adam
a little bit.
Sandler. Come on. How much fun would he have with all those people?
Great choice.
Yeah, that's a great choice. I want your 2 dinner parties to be combined.
Yes.
So I only have a couple more questions for you. And the last is where you can get the most philosophical, if you'd like, or just have some fun with it. When we say it's our mission here to have you live fearlessly like every day is Saturday, what does that mean for you and your family and the journey that you're about to have through retirement? What does living every day like it's Saturday mean to you guys?
I literally live like that every single day.
You have your whole life.
I have. I wake up every single day. I'm in a good mood every single day. And when I was retiring, my last year of school, every single day I celebrated. Today's the last day I'm going to have my last Valentine's Day party, guys. And I still do that every single day. It's like, what are we going to do today?
And even your retirement party, people came back from years ago.
Yes, I
She's
had.
like, if you had to describe Hope, she's like the star on the top of the Christmas tree. Everybody gravitates around her. Her first grade team from her last school, they used to call her mom. It was the 5 or 6 younger
So, yep.
girls, but she can talk to 5-year-olds. She could talk to 80-year-olds. The way she can adapt to whoever she's speaking with or whatever is just kids. Tell a story about the girl who saw you on Facebook, Lima.
So this little girl I taught in California way back in like 1986.
Yeah, that was Dos Palos, wasn't it?
No, that was at
was-
Merced. That was at McSwain Elementary School. I had her and her brother and her sister in kindergarten. I was there for 3 years, and so her senior year in college. So we were living down in Virginia. We had 2 kids, and I get this Facebook thing. Are you the Mrs. Bailey who taught kindergarten at McSwain Elementary School in Merced, California? I go, I am. She goes, I'm Linda Lima, and I wrote a paper about you in college called Snapping at the Rainbow. And I want to send it to you because you affected my life to this day.
Oh my
She
gosh.
goes, I could not skip, and a little boy made fun of her. And I said, guess what? Linda can snap her fingers like you cannot snap your fingers. I'm like, everybody has a special talent and everybody can do something that everybody else can't do. We are all perfect in every single way. And she wrote this paper and she sent, and she entitled it Snapping at the Rainbow, because we did rainbows and glitter, in kindergarten. And I literally started crying, and I'm like, I always wanted to make an impact on some kid's life.
Yeah.
If I touch one kid's life, I'm successful. And I've had numerous stories like that. One of my first grade teacher kids actually took my job in Ware, and she's in my classroom.
So cool.
So she came back to be a teacher, and I'm very close with her now. So I've had these kids who I've literally did what I did. I did what I wanted to do. I wanted to change someone's life, and because I had teachers like that who made my life different. You know what I mean? Who made me feel like I was worth something. But that was really cool. We're still good friends. on Facebook.
Good
an
for her
awesome
to track
legacy.
you down too. Finding
Yeah.
a Bailey
Yeah.
on the internet.
Yeah, I know. It's
probably
not an easy
difficult.
one.
Well, there's not many Hope Ann Baileys, I don't think, out
Yeah,
there.
Like with my job, I may be taking people to a wedding or a family reunion or vacation, but I don't know. They're just people behind this big, thick door. So, but she literally can personally impact kids and see the result. Where with me, if I get to point A to point B and everybody walks off the door alive, hey, good flight, you know.
Right.
But you don't really get a personal gratification out of it.
Sure.
It was just a,
You do.
transportation.
That's the one good thing about teaching.
Yeah.
Because I love kids.
Unless the engine's on fire and it's a
Another little
snowstorm.
boy I had taught me a lesson. He had cerebral palsy, and every day he ate dirt. Every day he tripped in my room. And I'm like, would you like help? He goes, no, Mrs. Bailey, I am handy-capable.
Oh.
I am not handicapped. I am handy-capable. So any child that has a special need, I'm like, you are handy-capable, because that's the mindset they need to have.
Yeah, the mentality.
And I don't know where he is now, but I'm sure he's very successful because that was his mindset.
That's really cool.
You have any other Saturday thoughts to add here, Brian? How do we live every day like it's Saturday?
For me, it's my time is my time now. I'm not on anybody else's schedule. I don't have to worry about being somewhere at any time. So if I want to go to the gym, I go to the gym. If we're probably going out to eat way too much. It's like
Okay.
3 days a week now we're going out to eat. Or she'll come home and I'm like, hey, would you like a Cosmo or something? It's just, for me, it's like she said, you're so much more relaxed now. And you don't realize I cover everything well, but there's a lot of stress as an airline captain. I must have to make 1,000 decisions every 3 days. Is the fuel right? Is the catering right? Okay, we got to get this maintenance, this. So your brain is always going. It never relaxes. And when you come home and it takes you a couple days to wind down and then you're right back at it again. So retirement for me has just been just the whole relaxation. I take my blood pressure now. It's like, oh, it's actually low, because I don't have to worry about anything. I don't have to worry about finances, thanks to you guys, and I don't literally worry about anything. My kids are great. Wife's great. Everybody's healthy.
That's awesome.
And that's the best thing for me. I can just enjoy life now.
God bless, you guys deserve it. We're going to check in on you later this year to make sure you're living every day like it's Saturday. So we would like for you to make a declaration. If we're nailing our first year of retirement and we're looking backward several months from now, later this year, what will we have to have accomplished this year to make sure that we're on the right path?
I don't ever have goals.
Well, you do have some trips planned.
You're,
so
like,
that's cool.
you're like the Dalai Lama of retirement mindset.
Oh yeah, no.
If you haven't noticed, Hope literally just got in the wagon in life and just
That's it.
mush.
Your goal is Friday to go on a
Somebody was the
4-day
horse
vacation.
and somebody was
Yeah,
driving
no.
Like
the
you're
wagon.
talking to the most goal-oriented person of all time.
I know you and Brian. If I can't. I will never compete with you two. Don't want to even have
Yeah,
any
but I
of the
don't want to
brain
be
cells
me
you
anymore.
guys
I want to be
have.
you.
See, that's it.
Yeah.
I don't want any of you guys' brain cells. You're way too high strung. You're way too. I
Guilty.
am perfectly
Yeah.
fine the way I am.
Yes.
Brian's
Okay.
like, "What do you want to do today?" Planning on taking a nap.
So
That's it.
is success then status quo? That's
Yeah.
So Brian, you can tell me, do you want to just ride Hope's coattails there and say you're already nailing it, or is there anything else that you want to kind of extra declare to the universe here?
I just want to keep building experiences between us on our trips because we just love that stuff. And I mean, when we go places, we'll hit, let's say Herculaneum or Pompeii, but our favorite thing to do is go down some scary side street, find some little hole in the wall place or a cafe and just sit there and have a cappuccino or a cannoli or something if we happen to be in Italy. And that, to us, we love the culture. And that's, because who knows how much time we got left. So I want to build as many experiences. We have bucket list stuff. She wants to go to Egypt. I'd like to go to the Holy Land and see all that stuff, but we gotta give that a little while just to calm down. But that's probably our two big bucket list things
Yeah.
would be Egypt and
Those are goals.
Yeah.
Those
That's
are
awesome.
goals to get to those places.
we were looking at that at our one of those two for our 40th anniversary.
Okay.
Nice.
Well, you guys have a jam-packed, action-packed year. So when we check in with you later, hopefully you'll have some good pictures and some
Yeah, yeah.
stories to share.
Yep.
Go down a couple of those scary side streets
Yep.
and let us know what happens.
We've done that a few times.
Yeah.
And it turned out great. We're still here.
Thank you for doing this, guys.
So thanks.
thank
It was
you.
This was
fun.
a blast.
You guys are awesome, by the way. I cannot thank you enough for coming into our lives and making him more calm. He's calmer. He's more settled. You guys did that. I did not do that. Mike did that.
Well, you blessed our lives too. I think because of the demand set that Brian brought to the table and his expectations.
Very polite way of saying that, Michael.
I think it helped us in many, many ways, both big and small, elevate our game and try to become, what we are today, to try to be a complete solution.
You should have taped those first couple meetings we had.
I'm glad we did it.
Oh man, maybe we can do actor reenactment later.
Close to coming to blows.
We could do that. That'd be a fun dramatization.
No,
for
I'm all set with that.
Well, thanks for sticking it out with us.
All right,
guys.
love you guys.
All
Good
right,
times.
we love it too. Bye.